In this video, we'll learn how to use data types for variables in p5js. I've got a sketch here in my p5 web editor where I've declared three variables that I'm using to represent an RGB color. So you can see here I'm declaring, then initializing them with different values. Down here in draw, I'm using the fill function and plugging in that my R variable to the red argument, my G into green, and my B into blue. That's what's controlling the orange color of this shape on the canvas. I've also got some interactivity from this mouse pressed block. So when the mouse gets clicked, we'll be incrementing up that my B variable by 10, which then increases the blue value of the color. You can see as I click the canvas, that color starts to shift. So this sketch is fully functional, but I am noticing that I need three different variables just to set one color. And I've also got to do some mental juggling to make sure I plug things in exactly right. What if I wanted to set 2 or 3 or even 4 colors with variables? This approach could get messy really fast. Luckily, knowing some key points about data types for variables can help us simplify our code. All variables store information. The data type of a variable is just the kind of information that it's storing. Variables will usually have just one data type, even if the value of that data changes. So the three variables storing numbers in our example will generally always store numbers and should always be treated as numbers in our code. Variables that store primitive data types hold just one simple value. Some frequently used primitive data types that you'll come across in this unit include numbers, which store whole integers or decimal point values, like the ones in our example, or booleans, which can contain only the value true or false, or strings, which store one or more characters together to represent text. There are other data types in JavaScript that you probably won't come across in this unit, so we won't cover those right now. We also have array data types. Arrays store multiple values of the same data type in a list. For example, a variable storing a string array might be used to hold a list of names. We're not going to cover arrays just yet, but they're super cool, and you can check out this example through the link in the description. Last but not least, we have object data types. These store multiple related values and behaviors all together in one variable. And that could be really helpful in making your code writing process a bit more intuitive and matching what you type out in the editor with the behavior that you're trying to see on the canvas. For an example of using object data types in a variable, let's play with the p5 color object to simplify our example code. So I'll comment out all those declarations and initializations and replace them with just one variable. I'll call it myCol. So I'm declaring it here at the top, which makes it a global variable. Then I'll initialize it in setup using the color function. And I'll use the same red, green, and blue values as the arguments that feed into that color function. So we're condensing all three values into one color object, and that's what gets stored in the myCol variable. Now when I want to use that color, all I have to do is type out the variable name. And I can do that in this fill function in the draw block. So notice I've cut down my number of variables by 2/3. And this to me makes much more sense to read than using three separate variables. Now I do have an issue here. When I click on my canvas, looks like I'm getting an error message coming from this line where I want to increase the variable controlling the blue component of my color. That's no longer defined because I commented out that declaration at the top of my code. So I'll comment out this line too. Now, a key aspect of object data types is that they behave in ways that make sense for the type of information that they're dealing with. So in this case, we have a variable storing a color object. It would make sense that we wanted to adjust the red or the green or the blue value of that color. So I'll go ahead and add in the myCol variable here, then a period, then the function setBlue. That dot syntax gives me access to special functions that are unique to variables storing objects. And I know specifically that setBlue exists for color object variables because I read it in the reference. So setBlue is expecting a number, and of course I can type in a static number here, let's say 128. Now when I click, the color changes, but it's never going to change again because I'm using a static value to set the blue component of that color object. What I could do instead is bring in whatever the myCol variable's current blue value is by using the blue function. So that will return whatever the blue is in that color object. And then I can just add 10 to it. So we have the same behavior that we started with, but the code is a little bit simpler. It's definitely easier to read, and what we've typed on screen matches up more closely with the behavior that we're seeing in our canvas. Last but not least, this approach would make it way easier to deal with multiple colors. Okay, that's an overview of how to use data types for variables in p5js.